Eric, I'll turn things over to you to give your overview of the work you're doing at your place.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Eric Barnhorst from Evame Farm. I'm a vegetable grower in Northumberland County near Brighton. And I sell my produce via CSA, farmers market, and some direct restaurant sales. In the past few years, I've done 3 separate research projects via the EFAO farmer-led research program. And it's been a really very valuable experience for me. In 2018, I did a cover crop / green mulch trial for planting garlic into winter-killed oats. In 2019, a tomato grafting trial showing yield benefit and economic viability for grafting tomatoes in high tunnels. And this past year, I did a field regeneration trial with the to try to improve a worn out field with the idea of moving into vegetable production in that field, using cover crops, compost mixes, and some other treatments. And that's about me.
Wonderful. Thank you, Eric. Appreciate that overview. And just for the benefit of the audience, we are going to be moving more into questions. We asked these 3 speakers just to give a very brief overview of the work they do at my farm and the types of trials they've been working on. So they're very short presentations, then we'll have lots of time for discussion about what it's actually like to participate in on-farm research as a farmer and a researcher. So the next person, Jen, are you ready to say a few words? So I'll call on Jen, who has joined us at the very last minute, which is fabulous. Thank you.
Hi, thanks for having me today. Yeah, I literally just joined in about 3 minutes ago. I got to see the early part of the session, but I had another meeting to slip to. And I'm just gonna, if you don't mind, I'm just gonna pop up the chat to make sure I'm actually looking at the right questions. I do have lots of lovely farm pictures, but unfortunately, I think it's more Aaron's pictures that you would have seen today. So I'll have to paint the picture using my linguistic skills instead. So I farm in the beautiful upper Ottawa Valley in Eastern Ontario, where we have a heavy silty clay and we're in a rain shadow. So for our farm, I grew up as a seed grower and also doing a lot of on-farm research with the Renfrew County Soil and Crop Improvement Association. And Scott Banks was a major part of what actually encouraged me. He was the OMAFRA rep in the area at the time. And I really thrived in having access to his resources and skills. But Scott retired 2 years ago and hasn't been replaced. So it definitely has left a major void in our region. We don't have a conservation authority. We don't have any local extension available other than Sebastian, who is phenomenal, but needed elsewhere as well. So for me, I was really looking for ways to help re-engage both my own farm and my community in ways to get some on-farm research, especially when it comes to being able to give feedback in terms of what the costs are and the rewards. A lot of the time in agriculture, I come from an agribusiness background, we talk about what the return on investment is, but it's really hard to necessarily get that for the opportunity cost of not doing something versus the intangible measurements. So really for us, being rain shadow, heavy clay, we've been no-till for most of my life, or as reduced till as possible. For us, it's really about building that organic matter and soil structure and soil health. We are, in terms of our farm, we have a very diverse rotation because we're seed growers. So corn, soybeans, wheat, cereal grains, or small grains like barley, oats, spring triticale, forage peas, canola, sunflowers. We have done flax, and I've also been dabbling with trying to move away from the monoculture. We actually do something called piola, which is a mix of forage peas and canola. And I found really good results in terms of lower disease, lower insect pressure, and easier harvestability. And so in terms of actual on-farm research, it's been ad hoc most of my life. I actually have commandeered a way wagon just to have something nearby because we're such an underserviced area. But I'm just so excited to be part of this and actually get to see the researchers on the farm and have them take some time and show me what they're looking for and measuring, because it's going to be so valuable. And I'm really excited when we can actually get together again to be able to show this to a lot of my neighbors. I hope that answered your questions.
Yeah, that's wonderful, Jen, and especially given you had about 2 minutes warning. So yeah, and Aaron does apologize for that. Aaron Bowman was just technical issues came up. So thank you so much, Jen, for jumping in there like that and giving an overview. And it's very interesting to hear that kind of gap in the service in terms of research and conservation authority programs and things in your area. So that's an interesting component of this for sure. So that's wonderful. And our next speaker as part of this panel is Dr. Laura Van Erd from the University of Guelph, the Ridgetown campus. And Laura, with that, I'll turn things over to you.
Great, thank you, Bronwyn. It's great to be part of this panel. I'm looking forward to hearing more from Eric and Jen. So I'm located at the University of Guelph Ridgetown campus. My research is based in Kent County and the surrounding 5 counties. In terms of on-farm research, my work really focuses on vegetable crop, processing veg, and low acreage crops such as sugar beets and seed corn. I've been doing on-farm research since the first field season, which was in 2004. And almost every year we have, my research program puts out about 12 different on-farm trials. And so that's a bit of my background in research. For the most part, we're looking at nitrogen fertility, trying to optimize nitrogen applications in these vegetable and low acreage crops. Also, clear interest in cover crops. So that's a high level overview of the on-farm research I'm involved in.
Wonderful. Thank you, Laura. So if I could ask Jen and Eric just to turn your videos and sound back on, and we'll just have an opportunity to have a kind of open mic session here with the 3 of you. And I'd encourage everyone in the audience to start asking questions in the chat, and we can get some questions going. But I have one to get us started, and I think all 3 of you can probably answer this one. But pretty straightforward one. What are some of the advantages of doing research on the farm as opposed to, say, a controlled research plot at a university or a publicly owned land? So the advantage of research on the farm. And who wants to start us off there? I thought you were putting your hand up. Yeah, Jen, there you go. Jen, start?
Well, yeah, sorry, I've been doing like turning the chat back on and off while also listening. So I'm actually, because I'm somebody who, sometimes people say I was a manure tank agitator in a past life. I'm going to say it's a loaded question. And the reason is we need to do both. Because I've been very happy with the on-farm, but in the on-farm, there's so many variables. We need that hardcore, research to make sure that you are actually measuring specific things. However, it's great to have something in a vacuum. It needs to be usable. And that's why having something, and especially something like on-farm where you connect that, you're not having 2 separate, we always talk about silos in farming. This is actually an ability to connect that. And so for me, that is the key here, is that the on-farm is needed, because then I can adapt the research to suit my own needs and share with my neighbors. And then we have an ability to collaborate and connect.
Great answer. I love that you can't have one or the other. There's complementary aspects to both. So thank you for that, Jen. Laura, do you want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, great. That's nice to hear, Jen. And I do agree. I guess a lot of the notes I took beforehand were echoed throughout this morning, right? It's about seeing what happens on your farm. And for me as a researcher, why I need to go to on-farm research is so that I have different soils to test and then different amounts of rainfall. And by doing that multiple times over a few years, then we start to build that database and can make some real inferences. But from the farmer perspective, it's about seeing how things work on your farm. And that's not much different than what we've heard earlier this morning.
That's wonderful. Eric, do you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, I would just say for me, I find it incredibly useful to have a definitive answer to a question for a production change or any kind of practice that is being investigated in a trial. Every year, if you're a farmer, you're looking at small changes here and there, and you're making a lot of decisions along the way. For me, having a definitive answer, yes or no, and knowing that that's supported with a rigorous process, at least rigorous enough to be able to move on from the question, is very helpful, because that's one less decision. If it means you adopt a new practice, that might have a huge budgetary impact on your business. So being confident that is a worthwhile change is great. But then on the flip side, if you can definitively say that this new practice doesn't work, that's also helpful. You're not wasting money on it, but you're also not you're not wasting your brain power thinking about whether you should be doing that every year. You've now answered it and you get to just move on. And that confidence in the answers, I find, also helps. I mean, I think most farmers have this impulse to share their knowledge. And I feel much more confident sharing my findings if I know there's some amount of rigor behind what this isn't just a one freak year. Oh, I tried this and man, it really worked out. No, we did some science here, and now I can confidently give some advice to my neighbors and other people in my community.
Are you okay if I just make a comment to that? Is that okay, Bronwyn?
Yeah.
And actually, that's Eric, great feedback, because I actually farm in partnership with my parents and my husband. And in case you haven't noticed, I'm a little passionate about certain things. So by having things measurable, it stops it being a fight over the winter months of which way, because my father measures things intrinsically a certain way and I measure another way. When we can put this in an Excel format, it's just a simple business decision. So just from a mental health and a teamwork point of view, that's why I like OnFarm Research.
Oh, I love that. That gives that objectivity,
Absolutely.
I guess, to the topic. And yeah, that's fantastic. And Eric, I really liked your point about you can tell when something doesn't work and you can just move on. So it's not always about finding the successes, but also when you can say, oh, that's not a good path to follow. So the chat board is lighting up with questions. So I have a really good one from Ruth Knight. Does on-farm research provide an opportunity for studying farming systems versus farming treatments? And will that get us over a barrier in understanding how to make different management decisions? So I don't know, Laura, do you want to take that one first?
I'll take a first stab at that question, and great question, Ruth. I think I would go back to what Dale said in the last session about, and Sarah said about keeping it simple for on-farm. So you already have your system, right? And so you're working from your system already. And then I think the best thing is to tweak it and find out, does this work or not work? And I think instead of comparing this system and all of the things that go on with this system to that system and making a whole bunch of different changes. I think by keeping it simple and tweaking as the years go on, then you have that definitive answer that Eric's looking for. I'm curious, Eric and Jen, would you change a bunch of things all at one time, or what's your approach?
So we changed just one thing, but we farm in a system. And so
Yeah.
an example would be cover crops, right? When it
Mhm.
comes to cover crop adoption, everybody's like, what are your barriers for entry? Or why have you tried it and not gone back? And it's like, okay, well, example, I tried one cover crop, but it didn't rain. Or I tried one cover crop and the next year I had slugs, but it was a cold spring. So for me, that's where it's a great question, because really we as farmers need to be figuring out how it works in our system. And again, we only get 40 years, give or take. So, and out of those years, how many are the normal year, right? So for us, I really like how Eric ties it back in about that's one less decision to make. So I think the research structure helps us recognize that we should pick a few things and try to tighten those in. But we do need to understand the systems approach, because again, we're farming in rotation. We've got different market forces going on. We've got different regulations. Sometimes you just simply have a seed shortage. So I really like that. And that's something I struggle with, is that how do I do it from the big and the small?
I like what you just said, Jen, because it's not just I'm going to try cover crops. It's about making that one thing fit in your system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great. Eric, did you want to add anything to that system versus treatment kind of question?
Yeah, I would agree basically with what Laura and Jen already said. For me, like on my farm, it's about individual decisions, and that might help you move towards a system or a change in your system overall. But the value of the research for me is testing sort of one thing at a time and really narrowing down to get a clear answer. And maybe your system's decision is going to be informed by other things. Or you have a direction you want to go, but the research lets you like focus on this one change at a time.
Great. Yeah, that's great answers to that question. We have lots of comments and questions in the chat, which is wonderful to see. I have one here that I think is interesting from Alan. Although on-farm and living labs will help get some producers to connect and work with researchers, most producers don't have that connection. So how do we get more producers and researchers to chat and learn from each other? I think that's an excellent question. So Jen, maybe I'll start with you and give Eric and Laura a minute to think about that answer.
To be fair, I think we all just need to have a little more fun. Like we don't, whoever said, I just want to do more plots this year. You know, like I have so much free time and so much luxury income. I want to do more plots. Like don't, and if you said that, you're my hero. But so for me is that we, especially the pandemic, has really shown how connection helps us and helps our industry. So I'm really keen to do networking. And networking outside of traditional areas or ways. I would never be able to get Laura to come to my farm just from our geographical distance. So maybe this is a really neat opportunity to do some of that, or some peer groups. I love the idea of peer groups where we can do something like that. But yeah, like I'll let somebody else fill in there, but that's kind of my start, is that we need to make it easy. We need to help reduce just, decision overload, and we need to have some fun.
Excellent. Love that answer. Thank you.
Can I disagree with you, Jen?
Yeah.
You can get me to your farm. I'd love to come to your farm, but I can't conduct research there, right? Because
exactly.
I need to, but I would love to come to your farm.
So Eastern researchers, come our way.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. It's a big province, and how can we maybe create more nodes and networks? And I like that presentation from Lindsay earlier in the Quinty group. So maybe there's some spread we can do Eastern and also to Northern Ontario. So any other comments on that, Eric? I'll turn to you next.
Yeah.
Researchers and producers.
I would just add maybe, I think that farmers want to talk about this kind of stuff. So it's a matter of providing farmers who already want to talk about this with a structure and some amount of education about scientific process and how you can get involved, because people want to talk about techniques, people want to talk about practices. It's just making it a little bit more scientific can be a great value to the community overall.
Great. Laura, any comments as a researcher?
No.
That's good.
No, I think, well, okay, since it's Alan Kay, it's not easy, right? It's about relationship building, and that takes time, and relationship building, it's so rewarding. The thing is, as Jen said, no one has a lot of time. However, look at all these great initiatives. 5 years ago, do you think we would be having all of these sites across the province, the federal, right, AAFC and Living Labs, OnFarm, Soils at Guelph, if I can comment more personally, right? We have a lot of initiatives. So I think it's great. We're starting those connections. Now it's about how do we bring that to the next group, right? We've got the people who are currently involved, and now how do we reach other people who think they might have an interest but aren't really there yet? And when I say other people, it's not just farmers. What about other researchers, and bringing them onto farms? So there you go. Yeah, go ahead, Jen.
Poor Bron, when she's like, God, Jen, stop with this.
No.
I guess for me, I'm looking at an area that's really underserviced with a lot of passionate people. Like, we actually have an environmental program coming out of our local college. There's no jobs. There's no jobs. And there's no ability to create jobs. All of us that do research, it's volunteer work. We don't have any funding, like just soil and crop. That's it. And I love soil and crop. And now we've got the soil network. But I'm just saying is that spread the networks farther and we will arrive, but there's no way for us to engage. So I'm just, you want to start with your early adopters, and then you got to make it sexy, and then you'll have the peer pressure working. It's just, you need to be able to allow like those nodes. I love that wording, nodes.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And there's a couple comments from Dale Cowan has mentioned to the importance of centers of excellence maybe across the province. How do we get some of these to leverage knowledgeable people for those underserved areas? So I think that's a really interesting idea that's worth exploring. Your idea, Jen, of the peer groups, and I think some of the work that's happening through OnFarm and EFAO and some of those other programs is kind of getting at that idea, but how do you really pop it up and make it fun and really start to help people participate? So I think there's also been some interesting comments, and I'll maybe ask the three of you to comment on it. I'm not going to find them right now, but there were a couple of comments that were really interesting about if you're doing an odd type of treatment or research plot at the edge of the road where all the neighbors can see it and getting kind of like, what the heck is so-and-so doing? Does that help? Could that spark conversation, or does that kind of put you at risk of looking like you don't know how to farm anymore or something? So Eric, do you want to comment on that maybe, of the value of just having it a visible plot trial that neighbors can see and wonder about?
Well, I'm a small producer, and I have my niche that I'm in, so I'm not like a lot of my farming neighbors already. So what's Eric up to over there is not necessarily a problem for me. I kind of like having some interesting things going on, but yeah, it definitely leads to conversations, and I find, like I said before, most farmers want to talk about practices, and so it does lead to interesting conversations.
Great. Laura, do you have that come up at all with the farmers you work with?
Yeah, so I'm picturing when we put out our fields, there's a lot of flags, right? And you've driven by those fields, and there's lots of flags, and there's small plots. From what I do, it's largely nitrogen management, right? And so if you're looking across the field and you see that yellow, not so big crop, then that's one thing, right? A farmer can easily identify it as just a nitrogen deficiency. Things get a little bit dicey if you're doing a weed trial, right? And you can see all of those weeds going to seeds, and then that gets people talking. Or if it's a cover crop trial and things look messy. We have a what in my mind is a beautiful trial on campus, but it's different heights and it's different. Some are dead, some are alive. And to some people's eyes, that's like, oh, what a mess, right? And it does open you up for conversations. And I think you need to have a little bit of a thick skin to roll off those comments of, hey, what's the mess in your field? And you just say, oh, that's green gold.
No, that's great. Jen, any comments on that piece of?
I think Laura is right about the thick skin. I think it's also maybe you just need to make sure from a research point of view what your personality is suited to. Again, for me, small town, my dad used to always say, if you haven't heard a good rumor by 10, just start one. So sometimes, you know, for those of us that are good, that are the early adopters and are the trial people, we just provide entertainment for the neighborhood. I do like the idea of signage, because then people kind of know, oh yes, this is to be expected. And I have found that the unanticipated plots, the absolute epic failures that have always happened near a road, are great conversation starters. So when I used to be in agribusiness and customers would call me when they had a failure close to the road, I would just tell them to take the competitor signs and put them up there. So you can have a little bit of fun with this.
I love it. That's great.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Laura.
I like that idea of signage, right? And it is a great point for conversation. And yeah, good on you.
Yeah, that's great. And I've seen some interesting ones from some of the companies that put up corn is growing here kind of thing. It's like, okay, that's straightforward, but yeah, those are really helpful. There's so many questions and comments. Angie, I might highlight for you that there's a couple questions that I think you could probably answer related to the program. There's one from Dawn, I believe it's Dawn McCabe, has asked about soil testing and soil sampling. So I think that's probably more.
Sorry, I've been trying to keep up in the chat. So if I've missed something, maybe enter it again. Sorry.
Yeah, there's lots of comments, which is really great. I think with that, Gord Green had accepting on the lunatic fringe. I love that. There was another comment. I'm just scrolling quickly about the availability of soil testing. I guess that gets a little bit at Dawn's as well. If you're doing these on-farm research trials, is there actual availability in maybe some of these underserved parts of the country, or how do you get the testing back and forth to the farmer and the researcher and to everybody's satisfaction of the scientific rigor and practicalities of it all? So just one last comment on that as a practical sort of aspect on farm research. And Laura, do you want to start with that one?
I definitely can. And I would go back to Eric's comment about what is the definitive answer you would like. And so that should guide what you're testing and how you're testing. And if you keep that in mind, then I think that would help in answering, you know, how to sample and where. The other thing I'll comment on is opportunities to partner, right? Whether it's ecological farmers, whether it's OSCIA, Soils at Guelph, or your local co-op to help in terms of designing an experiment. I think there's lots of opportunities there. Like Eric said, farmers want to talk about what they're doing, what they're seeing, what they're curious about, and making those partnerships, relationships, it's pretty valuable.
Wonderful. Jen, any comments on that piece, the kind of practical aspects of soil testing or other types of tests you might want to be doing as part of your trials?
Yeah, so I think for a lot, like for people who are big researchers, they're doing everything right. But like when you listen to the stats, a lot of farmers aren't current on soil sampling. So I think this is a good way to kind of be a primer to get people up on board. It's great to engage with local agribusiness because, you know, if you're looking to have less inputs, maybe there's other services you can be hiring because that's an important pathway in a rural community, especially when you don't have, you know, not-for-profits or other staffers available. And then the last one is like, just take initiative. So once I knew I was approved for on-farm and I knew the researchers were going to be coming and doing soil samples on a field I just previously sampled, so that's great, I actually invested in having soil optics come and map my farm as well. And I've shared that information with the researchers. Whether they use it or not is up to them. But I just wanted to, I think a lot of this is that we can't expect other people to do our jobs for us. We're professional farmers. We need to, we need to be looking after this. There's great ways to do it.
Excellent. Eric, any comment on that? And
I just add that getting some support through, like for me, it's been the EFAO, but some support from whoever your community is, it is really helpful in terms of like for doing the right type of testing, the right time for the project that you're interested in. That's been very helpful.
excellent. I think I can speak for everybody that this was a really enjoyable discussion and conversation with the three of you. So I really appreciate your insights. And Jen, thank you again for stepping in at the last minute. That was great. And Eric and Laura, thank you so much for your insights as well. It's been really nice to hear directly from people involved on farm research. So thank you very much.